All right, weekly text-based Tanya. What chapter are we on?
36.
36, great, because we finished 35 last week. Before we start, we want to dedicate today's learning to a refuah shlema, kreva, for Yeshua Leib ben Leah Pesha.
Thank you.
So, we are starting a new chapter. Let's just refresh our memory what chapter 35 was all about. The Alter Rebbe referred to chapter 35 as a nechama, as a comfort for the beinoni. Comfort for what? What was the beinoni distraught about? What was bothering him? He was asking a philosophical question, right? He was asking, what's the point of the type of existence, which I now realize is probably the best that I can ever strive for as a non-tzaddik? What's the point of living as a person who will constantly have an unresolved internal conflict, and the best that I can ever achieve is behavioral perfection? At best. That's what I can achieve. What's the point of it? So what did the Alter Rebbe tell him? How did he comfort him?
Tzaddikim have to do the same? Tzaddikim have to do the same thing?
Okay, so he told him essentially, tzaddikim have to do the same thing. He says, why are you crying about the fact that you're not a tzaddik? Even the tzaddik who does have a resolved inner conflict, where, as we learned in chapter 10, either the incomplete tzaddik has eradicated the animal soul, or the complete tzaddik has actually converted it into a second godly soul. But even that tzaddik who's accomplished that, at the end of the day, he still has to focus on action, because, as we explained in chapter 35, the sensitivity of the soul, the ava v'yira, the soul's love and awe of Hashem, is still only a subjective experience that the soul is having, as it is. It beholds Hashem, it appreciates Hashem, it has feelings for Hashem, but by definition, that's two separate entities in a relationship with one another. And to become absolutely one with Hashem, actually, the only way to do it is through action. So at the end of the day, for all of the tzaddik's great spiritual sensitivity, that doesn't allow him to become one with Hashem. It's only through action. And that's precisely what the beinoni was told to pursue as well, to pursue action. Okay, so that's what we spoke about in chapter 35. Now, as we begin chapter 36, we're going to focus more on the question of why is action, why is the soul's performance of mitzvahs in an embodied state, why is that so precious? We explained that it allows us to transcend our separateness, even the separateness of the soul, which is a lofty separateness, but a separateness nonetheless. But we didn't really explain why that's what Hashem desires. Why does Hashem want this as well? Why is this so important to Hashem? So in chapter 36 we get into that, what Hashem wants, what Hashem is really after. Now, it may seem somewhat familiar to you from chapters 33 and 34. If you remember, in chapters 33 and 34, we already brought up the idea that Hashem wants a dwelling place in the physical world. And we spoke about how we grant him that dwelling place in the physical world through letting him into our minds and hearts when we are conscious of him, through our belief in him. And we called that a dwelling place in the lower realms. And relatively speaking, it is. But here in chapter 36, we're going to speak about a dwelling place in the lower realms in a much different way. We're speaking about it in the objective sense, not as something that is dependent on somebody's mindset, but actually a real discernible change in the physical world itself. Okay, but let's just jump in. Chapter 36. V'hinei mudaz zeis, maimer azal. It is a well-known saying of our sages, Shetachlis brias elam hazehu, that the purpose, the ultimate purpose of the creation of this world, the physical world, is shinisave, that Hashem had a taiva, a lust, a yearning. Shinisave HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Liyeslay, that he should have for himself, dira betachtonim, a dwelling in the lower realms. Okay, so that's the expression, dira betachtonim, a dwelling in the lower realms. The Alter Rebbe is going to jump on that term right away. V'hinei le'shayich l'fanav yisborach b'chinas ma'ilo mata. Now we know for Hashem there's no such thing as above and below. What does it mean, above and below? Those are terms that finite beings use. Finite beings can only be in one place at one time, so they speak about here and there, up and down. For Hashem, there's no up and down. I don't even just mean there's no spatial up and down. I mean even relative conceptual up and down. Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is truly everywhere. So why are we using this term? Because Hashem fills all worlds equally. So that's our question. What does this dira b'tachtenim mean? Ela biro inyan, but here's the explanation of the matter. Here we go. Before the creation of the world, he alone was singular and unique. And he filled the entire place where the future world would come into being. So there was nothing but him. And even now it is the same for him. The creation of the world didn't create any change for him from his perspective. Rather, the only change is from the subjective perspective of the created beings. That the created beings receive life from him through various different concealments. Like it says, no man can see me and live. In other words, inherently, there is a concealment of Hashem, or we wouldn't be able to exist. No man can see me and live. If Hashem would be revealed, if infinity would be revealed, there'd be no place for a finite entity. We'd be completely overwhelmed out of existence. So our existence is inherently a product of concealment of the light. In fact, our sages go further and say, when it says, no man can see me and live, and live hints to the chayos, the angels who are called chayos, which means even the angels can't see God and live. They see a glimmer. It's like looking at a crack of light under the door, and then you get a hint of what kind of light must be in the room, but you can't go in the room because it would be too bright. Now this is the concept of the hishtalshalis ha'elamais, the chain-like descent, devolvement of worlds, and their descent from level to level. In other words, it is not just one concealment, it is a series, it is a system of compounding concealments. We've spoken about this before, about if you take translucent curtains and you put layers of them over the window, then they will eventually have the effect of being opaque. And an olam, the word for world in Hebrew is olam, is from the etymological root helim, which means concealment. A world is a concealment. It is a concealment of Creator, because by virtue of seeing creation, we by definition, per se, are masking creator. And these olamais, each one compounds the effect of the previous ones until creator is all but entirely concealed. All these different, he calls them garments, conceal the light of Hashem. Until the net result is the creation of this physical coarse world. This is the end of the line. It couldn't get more concealed than this. Concealment after concealment after concealment, and this is the net result. This physical world.
Should we go back to the beginning?
Hello, is your class here?
It seems familiar to you?
We did this last time.
This is chapter 36.
36, yeah.
It seems familiar?
Sorry, I was a few minutes late. I should have said it at the beginning.
It-
I'd like to hear it again.
I said earlier, some of it might sound familiar because in chapters 33 and 34 we spoke about Dir B'Tachtenim a little bit also. But we're going to come at it from a new angle now. Okay, so he's continuing to describe this series of concealments. Ad shenivra elam hazish hagash mevchomi mamish. Right. Until the net result is the creation of this physical world. Vu atachten b'medrege shein tachtein lamata mimeno beinyan hester eris baruch v'cheshich kafel mechupel. And this world is the lowest level. There is no level lower than it as far as concealment of the light and the darkness that is doubled and redoubled. This is a famous expression in Chassidus Chabad. Chassidus Chabad is all based on Tanya, and there are certain phrases from Tanya which are worked and reworked over and over again. So this phrase, hatachtein, elam haza hatachtein, she'ein tachtein lamata mimeno. This low physical world, lower than which there is none. There is nothing lower. There is no tachtein, there's no lower than this lowest world. In other words, you couldn't even in theory imagine more concealment than what this physical world brings about. Atshahu mali, he explains now the condition of this concealment. Atshahu mali klippas v'sitracha, to such an extent that this world is full of klippa, see chapter 6 and 7. And sitracha, again 6 and 7. Shein neged Hashem mamish, which literally oppose Hashem, Leimer, saying, Ani v'avsiyad, I exist and nothing else. Wow, what a chutzpah. So these klippas can exist in such a concealment. V'hine. The ultimate purpose of the descent of the worlds, level after level, is not for the sake of the higher worlds. Important concept. Hashem made this system we call Seder Ishtalshalis, this chain-like descent of world after world after world, concealment after concealment after concealment. What is the tachlis? What is the point of it? What's it supposed to accomplish? So he says, clearly the point of it is not the higher worlds. Now you might think that that's patently obvious. Obviously, the point isn't the higher worlds, because if it were, why didn't he stop when he had the higher worlds? Why did he keep on going? But this is an incredibly important concept. It is such an important concept that it continues to be a difficult concept for most religious Jews today to grasp. In fact, it is probably the most difficult concept for religious Jews to grasp. Not just Dir B'Tachtenim, but this idea that the heavens are clearly not the ultimate point of creation. In many systems of thought, which I'm not here to negate because Elu ve'elu divrei elikim chayim, and they all have validity, I'm not here to negate them, but I'm here to contextualize them. In many systems of thought within Torah, I'm saying legitimate, holy systems of thought within Torah, the ultimate goal and point of it all is always framed as Gan Eden, as the afterlife of the soul. Well, that has its place, and within a certain context it makes sense, but here we're discussing the point not just of reward and punishment, which is a concept unto itself, but we're talking more on an existential level. Look, Hashem is everything. He is complete. He's perfect. And then he decides to make a world. Okay. So then not only he makes a world, but he makes a world after a world after a world, and he keeps going. He doesn't stop. It's like, okay, enough already. Like, enough. Enough concealment. No, he keeps going. He keeps going. And he doesn't stop until he has this total concealment, this world where you can even have opposition to Hashem. You can have denial of Hashem. So I don't yet know why he wanted that. I know that he wanted it because nothing compels him. So he clearly wanted it. I don't know why he wanted it, but I know that he wanted it. And when I say I know that he wanted it, I can be even more specific than that. I can say I know that he wanted to go that far. And he wasn't satisfied, so to speak, until he got that far. And so therefore the point of it all isn't in heaven. The punchline to this whole thing isn't welcome to the pearly gates. It cannot be. 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 And it's so frustrating because the average Orthodox Jew finds it so difficult to escape from this paradigm. And if I were to say something probably I shouldn't say, I would say it's, in my opinion, probably Christological influences. Because the Christians emphasize afterlife. That's their whole focus on that's the end all and be all. But from a purely Jewish perspective, does it even make sense to you that the ultimate point of it all would be heaven? Does it even make sense to you? And if so, I'll just ask you a simple question for discussion and for thought and for pondering. If the ultimate point of it all is the reward in the afterlife called Gan Eden or paradise, then how come when Mashiach comes and there's the resurrection of the dead, we're going to bother those poor, comfortable souls who are blissing out in the highest levels of Gan Eden, and we're going to pull them out of there, and we're going to make them come right back down to the physical world for embodiment all over again?
Rabbi?
Hold on. Why would we do that? Don't ask me a new question. I'm asking you a question.
I'm not asking you a new
Hold on a second. I want you to answer my question. Why would we do that to Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama? He just had a yahrzeit a couple days ago. He's 3,300 so many levels up in Gan Eden, and Mashiach's going to come any second now. We're going to pull him out of that. Why would we do it? It's a real question.
So the reason is that the only place that we can accomplish what we need to accomplish for Hashem is here.
Right. But it's already accomplished. But hold it, your answer is the only place where we're going to accomplish what Hashem wants us to accomplish is here. But that's what the people who are fixated on Gan Eden will also say. They'll say the only way to achieve it is down here. The only way we can accomplish is down here. I'm saying something more than that. So I'm saying something different.
You're saying that
After the perfection of the world is already accomplished, there's nothing more to accomplish down here.
is saying that the ultimate purpose of creation is this world.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So
The ultimate purpose of creation is this physical world.
100%. But,
Yes.
But there is a caveat that we can't believe that it's just for this world.
It's a hard concept.
Right.
Yeah. That's why I'm harping on it, because
Right.
it is
It can't
difficult.
just be for this world.
Well, it can't. You're saying it can't just be for this physical world. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying the exact opposite. It can't just be for heaven.
No, it can't just be for heaven, but it has to take place here in order to
Right, and that's-
ultimate destination.
Okay, so that's what they will argue. They, whoever they is,
Okay.
they will say, yeah, there needed to be a physical world, but really it's a stepping stone in order to be able to earn a higher level in Gan Eden, so the whole point was Gan Eden.
But it's not a stepping stone.
Did I ever tell you guys the story about my Buddhist friend, the Buddhist priest? I'm sure I did, because I tell that story all the time. My friend, the Buddhist priest, who is a good Jewish boy, who he, very quick, I'll try to tell it quickly. He had a PhD in philosophy from Princeton. And you know, like Yisro, who he studied every Avodah Zarah in the world before he found Hashem. So this guy studied every Avodah Zarah in the world. He didn't. I've told this story many times, and I said it's not a Hollywood ending. He died and he was cremated, and his ashes were spread in Tibet. Okay, so don't. Yeah, that's right, because that's what happens. Because this is the lowest world. That there's no world lower than it. That's what happens in the lowest world. That Jews die in Gullus and are cremated. That's what happens. Okay.
Sad.
That's the reality.
But that's my point.
But hold on, let me tell you why I'm telling you this story. This good Jewish boy who was raised in Metairie, Louisiana, brilliant mind, probably the smartest person I ever met in my life. Anyways, he studied every religion, every philosophy, every ideology. He got a PhD in philosophy from Princeton, and he was a man of integrity. So at one point he said, I have to follow one of these. So he chose Buddhism. I'm telling you the story very, very quickly. Anyway, so he became a Buddhist priest, because when a Jew becomes a Buddhist, he can't just be a regular Buddhist, he has to be the Buddhist priest, because the Jews are like everybody else, only more so. Okay. So, I was learning Tanya with him one day.
With the Buddhist priest.
Yeah. We used to learn Tanya together every week, and I would come over to his house, and I would put on tefillin with him, and he would always tell me, there's nothing in my religion that prevents me from putting on tefillin. And I would tell him, it's okay, I wasn't worried. I wasn't, like he thought I was scared I was making him do an Aveda in his religion.
Jewish and a Buddhist priest.
That's what I'm saying. And he went to Hebrew school, and Hebrew school did a wonderful job of convincing him that when he started on his search in earnest for a religion to live by, the first one he crossed off his list was Judaism, because he knew from Hebrew school how superficial and shallow Judaism was, the version that he was given in Hebrew school. So chalk one up again for American Hebrew schools. At any rate, so I was learning with him, and he, in the middle of learning, all of a sudden he got all excited and he started saying, that's radical, that's radical, that's radical. And he wouldn't calm down, just kept saying, that's radical, that's radical. And I'm waiting for him to calm down and tell me, what is radical? That's radical, that's radical. And I'm like, okay, all right, what's radical? He says, nobody says this, only you guys say this. Now, remember, I told you his background. He studied every ideology, every religion, every philosophy in the entire world. I mean, every known one. I guess there's probably some obscure religions he didn't know about. But he was very, very aware of every belief system. And he starts saying, that's radical, nobody says this, nobody says this, nobody says this. So it occurs to me, I didn't even know what it was he was getting excited about, but that whatever he's about to tell me is really super important for me to listen to, because he's about to tell me something that is uniquely Jewish and perhaps uniquely Hasidic, and that I didn't even realize was so, because I just read it and I wasn't even sure what he was reacting to. So it's called the expert blind spot. Apparently, there was something really big, a bombshell there, and I was totally oblivious. So finally he calmed down, and I'm like, okay, what is radical? What does nobody say except for us? He says, there are people who will say that the phenomenological universe does not exist. Phenomenological universe means the world that engages our physical senses, the world where stuff happens. So there are those who will say that it doesn't exist, it's an illusion. There are others who say that it does exist, but it's only as a stepping stone to get to a spiritual world, which is the true existence. He says, of course, there are atheists who are materialists and they only believe in the physical world, but I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about spiritual belief systems that believe in spiritual worlds and believe in a creator. No one believes that there are spiritual worlds, and yet the entire purpose of all can only take place in the physical world. That is radical. Nobody else says that. So that really hit home for me. Nobody else says that. Of course, as Jews, we believe in Gan Eden. Of course, we believe in an afterlife for the souls. But that's not a uniquely Jewish concept. I'm not saying we got it from them. They got it from us. But I'm saying it's not uniquely Jewish. Plenty of religious people, in fact, I would argue, by definition, all religious people, it depends how you define a religion, but all religious people believe in some spiritual afterlife, some reward for the disembodied soul. But it is uniquely Jewish to make the claim that the ultimate purpose of all can only take place in the physical world.
And what is that purpose, Rabbi?
We don't know yet. I didn't say yet.
Oh, okay.
Didn't say yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there, like, on a day-to-day basis, is there a difference really between, let's say, Mashiach and Olam Haba?
A practical day-to-day difference?
Yeah, meaning you're
100% practical day-to-day difference. In motivation.
Right.
When you have to make a decision
Yeah.
between something that will give you a higher Gan Eden or something that will make the world a holier place, which one are you going to choose? If you have a choice to work on your own spiritual development for another minute or go out and refine the world, which one are you going to choose? I don't want to get into a whole side conversation, but there's a famous story of the Maharam Mirottenberg, who was held ransom. And again, I'll tell the story very quickly. He ordered his followers not to redeem him because he didn't want the local authorities to get into the business of ransoming rabbis. Anyways, he died in imprisonment. He was held in a tower. It's a whole story. And even after he passed away, they would not release his body for Jewish burial. And then later, there was this Jew, his name was Alexander Wimpfen, and he paid to get the body of the Maharam released for Jewish burial. And after he did that, he had a dream where the Maharam came to him and thanked him and said, because of what you did for me, I'm allowed to give you a reward from heaven. And they're allowing me to give you one of two options. You have to choose. Behind door number one is you're going to get paid back for the money you spent redeeming my body, which was a small fortune. You're going to get paid back, and not only that, but you and all of your descendants will be wealthy ad soif kol hadoros, for the end of all time. Behind door number two is you're going to be on my level in the afterlife. Imi b'michitzasi. But the catch is you have to come with me tomorrow. So he woke up, and he spoke with his wife, and he said, listen, we can be rich or I can go to heaven.
No door number 3?
No, it's two options. It wasn't Monty Hall. So she's like, well, what do you want to do? And he's like, well, I want the heaven. And she's like, okay, go for it. So they called all the kids together, and he's like, okay, Tati's going away, and he's going to a good place. And he died the next day. So you can tell by the way I'm telling it, by the way, I'm kind of like giving away the punchline. But the story is really a story within a story. Reb Hillel Paritcher, the Mashpia, used to tell this story at Fabrengens, and then he would ask everyone at the Fabrengens, so if you were Reb Alexander, which one would you choose? And typically, everyone would say, oh, I would be holy like Reb Alexander. I would take heaven. Of course, I don't need money. I want spirituality. And then he would rebuke them all. And he would say, you guys are so selfish. What does anybody benefit from your going to a higher level in heaven? Take the money. You know how much good you can do in this world? You know how many people you can help with the money? But let's get back on the topic. The main do you remember what the main topic is? What were we even talking about? Tanya, 36. We're not talking about spirituality. That's how we got off topic. Materiality, the physical world. So we're saying like this. It is logically impossible that the purpose of creation is the spiritual worlds. And the fact that Hashem continued creating world after world until he got to the physical world, that itself logically forces us to conclude that the purpose of creation is in that, what we call that end of the line, in the physical world. Now, we don't know why yet. You asked a good question. Why? I don't know. I didn't learn yet.
Okay.
I know logically that it must be.
Okay.
I don't know what it is yet. Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm backing up. The purpose of the creation of the worlds is not for the spiritual worlds, because those are just a descent. Remember, even the highest spiritual world is a descent from Hashem. But rather, the ultimate point is the physical world. Okay, now we're going to start to get into why. Well, why? Why should that be the tachlis? Okay. You know what the answer is? Because. It really is. I mean, we're going to elaborate. But the answer is because. Because that is what arose to his desire. That's what he had a craving for. He decided he wanted pickles and ice cream. It arose to his desire that he should have nachas, he should have fulfillment. When the darkness would be subjugated and even transformed into light.
Okay, there we
go. That the light of the infinite should shine in the place of darkness, meaning the physical world. But Yasser says for Yasserais with greater intensity, and with the advantage of light that comes from darkness, much more than how the light shines in the spiritual worlds. That there, in the spiritual worlds, the light is diminished so that the spiritual worlds are not nullified out of existence. And yet, we didn't explain yet the mechanics of how, ultimately, it is only in the physical world where we can have our cake and eat it too, where Hashem can have his cake and eat it too, where there can be the ultimate revelation. It's a total inversion of our previous way of thinking. We think of the spiritual worlds as revelation and the physical world as concealment. But he says to you, hold on a second. Revelation and concealment are relative terms. We think of the spiritual worlds as revelation because for us, it's so spiritually, everything there is spiritually revealed. But relative to Hashem himself, to the infinity itself, the spiritual worlds are concealment. And if they wouldn't be concealment of the infinite, then spiritual beings wouldn't be able to exist. So the spiritual worlds are concealment. Now you can say the physical world's even more concealment, but here's the weird concept. It's so much concealment that it comes full circle and it becomes revelation. We didn't explain yet how that works, but that's basically the concept, okay? And that he says, the Alter Rebbe says that Hashem gets special nachas, he gets special joy from this, where the darkest world becomes the source of the greatest light. Okay. Now, in order for us to be able to endure that revelation without being nullified out of existence, Hashem gave us the Torah, which is called Oiz V'Koyach, strength and might. Hashem is going to give power to the righteous to endure their reward in the world to come. Meaning to say, you think it's so easy to endure the reward? The reward is so intense, it could nullify you out of existence. But Torah is the mechanism by which a finite being can encounter the infinite and not lose its own existence. That we will not be nullified out of existence when Hashem's light is revealed without a garment. Like it says, when Mashiach comes, your teacher, your master, meaning Hashem, will no longer be concealed from you. Pirush, he will no longer be hidden with a garment. Your eyes will see your master. And furthermore it says, the prophets say, Ki ayin ba'ayin yiru v'gomer. You will see eye to eye with Hashem. And it says, again from the prophets, the sun will no longer be your light. Hashem will be your light forever. So there will be this intense revelation in the physical world after Mashiach comes, and yet, paradoxically, we will be able to endure that intense revelation. That is known that the era of Mashiach, the era which is the final culminating phase of history where there will be complete peace in the world, and especially the era of the resurrection of the dead, where the physical world will be so completely refined that souls from heaven will only be able to go up by coming down. That's a little paradox there. The only way for a soul in heaven to have another aliyah will not to go to a higher level of Gan Eden like they've been doing for thousands of years, but actually to come back down to the physical world, because the physical world will be that refined. So it's known that those phases, Yemei Mashiach and Trias HaMesim, those are the point, the purpose, the completion of the physical world, and the purpose for which the world was created in the very beginning. Then there's another era even after that called Elef Hashvi, which is even beyond the Tachlis. That's the reward. That's another state of being even further beyond. So basically what we're describing here is that the spiritual worlds are very nice, and there's a lot of spiritual revelation there. But relative to infinity itself, the spiritual worlds are concealment. So what's the point of them? Rather, the point is that there should be a physical world which is the ultimate concealment, and that in that ultimate concealment there should become the ultimate revelation, which will come about when Mashiach comes, and even beyond when Mashiach comes, when the dead will come back, the souls will come back into physical bodies, and that the ultimate godly place, holier than any heaven, will be the physical world. Now, in order to kind of try to wrap our minds around this, he says there's a precedent for this. He says, you're trying to envision what this looks like. We do have historical precedent. He says, "V'gam kvar hoyelei me'ein zeh." We have a similar, me'ein means a similar situation, b'shas matan Torah, at the time when the Torah was given. K'dichsiv, like it says there, "Atorei soladaski Hashem hu Elokim ein ed milvada." You were shown to know that Hashem is God, there is none else. Not just that you believe. I want to make them be quiet. How do we make them be quiet? Can you do it nicely?
Yeah, in the back?
No, whoever's talking. But can you do it nicely?
Who it is.
Oh, don't even tell me who it is, and do it super, super nicely, because I don't want to be mean to anyone. Okay, if I go over there, I'm going to come off all brash, and I don't want to do that. And then be the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish. Trying to make the world a better place. Okay, just 5 more minutes here. Okay, all right. So we said when Matan Torah occurred, when the revelation at Sinai occurred, it says you were shown to know that Hashem is all there is. Not just you believe it conceptually as an article of faith, dogmatically, but you were shown, literally they saw it. In fact, they saw it with their physical senses. So that's a sort of sneak preview to what it's going to be like when Mashiach comes. With our physical senses, it will become empirically evident that there's nothing but God. How do you like that? And by the way, as Mashiach is getting closer, that's what science is actually finding. Empirically, they're searching and finding that it's all one, the unity of matter and energy, and ultimately they'll find the unifying theory of everything, which all the great minds are in search of. And they will find empirical evidence that it's all one. But at the time of Matan Torah, that's what happened. We physically experienced the oneness. You were shown with literally, he calls it riyah chushis, with your physical sense of sight. Not just a knowing or an awareness, but physical sense of sight. Okay. Like it says, it says that all the nations saw the sounds. They saw what is heard. They had synesthesia. In other words, that which is normally heard, meaning that which is only hearsay, meaning spiritual phenomena, became physically visible to the naked eye, to the human being's eye. So that was a sort of a sneak preview of what it's going to be like when Mashiach comes. We're going to walk outside, we're going to look around, we're going to see godliness. Not from a perspective of, we're going to be so enlightened that we're going to know that it's there, we're going to appreciate it. You're going to see it empirically with your physical senses. Like it says, or we said that. And the sages say, they looked into the east and they heard the voice of God saying, I am the Lord your God. And also in all four directions, and above and below. And like the Tikkun Isaiah says, there was no direction which the voice of God did not emanate. And again, this is not talking about a subjective enlightenment. We're talking about an objective experience that you'd be able to record it with a tape recorder. It was not somebody's subjective imagination, or even, don't call it imagination because it makes it sound like it's false, but it wasn't just because they were super sensitive. No, it was objectively occurring in the physical world. And why was that revelation? Because Hashem's ratzon, Hashem's desire, as embodied in the Ten Commandments, was being revealed at that moment. And when that was happening, so God became revealed in the physical world. I think we're going to try to finish this chapter if we keep moving. Okay. Shehein klalas HaTorah. And the Ten Commandments are the aggregate of the entire Torah. And the Torah is Hashem's deepest desire. And there's no concealment. We were talking about worlds. Worlds are concealment. And world after world is concealment after concealment. But Hashem's Torah is Hashem's most revealed desire. That Hashem, you gave us in the light of your face a Torah of life. Meaning to say that the Torah is the Oyer Panecha, the light of your face, which also is Panemius, your innermost desire of Elochin. Now, what happened when the Jews experienced this revelation? They became Batal B'Metzias. They lost themselves. Like our sages say, that with each utterance, their souls flew out. They couldn't endure. Then Hashem brought them back. He revived them with the dew that will be used in the future to revive the dead. And that is called Tal Torah, the dew of Torah, which is also called Ois, which is called might. Like the sages say, anyone who engages in the study of Torah, even if he loses himself in the infinity of it, the dew of Torah will bring him back to his selfhood. But then what happened is they lost it. They worshipped the golden calf, and they messed it all up. And they lost that beautiful situation, and the world became coarse. They became coarse. The world became coarse, and it will be that way until the end of days. Then at the end of days, the world will become refined again. The physical body will become refined again. And then the physical world and the physical body will be able to receive the revelation of godliness. That through this vehicle of Torah called Ois, we will have the strength to endure this type of intense revelation. And through the Jews experiencing this intense revelation, even the nations of the world will also receive it. In other words, again, it's not a subjective experience. It's not an enlightenment for a certain elect. No, it is a It is an objective reality, and therefore, yes, all nations will be able to perceive it. If only the Jews can see it, then it's not a physical objective reality. The point here is that the world itself becomes refined. In fact, not only will all the nations see it, but even, like we say, the wolf will lie with the lamb, so even animals will be tuned in on some level. Obviously not to the degree of humans, because humans have human consciousness, but the whole world will be objectively aware of this revelation of God. The nations, the non-Jewish people, will go by the light of the Jews. The Jewish people will go by the light of Hashem. The glory of God will be revealed, and all flesh will see. Flesh, emphasis is on flesh. Again, empirical, sensorial, physical experience, not just something cerebral. Like it says, in fact, the world will be so shocked that humanity is going to be like crouching in the cracks between rocks. That's how it's described here, the visualization that's described by the prophet. They're going to be like hiding, looking for cover in between the rocks, because the light of God is going to overwhelm them. And they'll be like, wow, what is this that's happening? Again, if it were only for heaven is only for those who earn it. But this is something that's going to happen objectively in the entire physical world, so everyone will perceive it, even those who will be overwhelmed by it. Like we say, that Hashem is going to appear in the glory of His strength upon all inhabitants of the world, meaning Jew and non-Jew alike, because it will just be that real of an experience. Okay, so we're going to still have to explain how we actually create this, how we actually go about getting the physical world to be that refined. We didn't explain that yet. That's going to be in chapter 37. But now we have a greater understanding of the fact that what we were complaining about in the previous chapter, chapter 35, oh, boo-hoo, all we can do is focus on our physicality, on our behavioral perfection. Mm-hmm. And now the Alter Rebbe says to you, hey, I got to clue you in on something. The entire purpose of all existence was that Hashem desired that you should refine the physical world through your embodiment. So you're not missing out on anything. This is not only the best that you can muster as a non-tzaddik, but this is the point of all existence.